Welcome, first of all, to the session. So I'm really happy to introduce Amanda to you today. She's a teacher, trainer, and materials writer with over 10 years of experience in the area of diversity, specializing in race and LGBT awareness. She has recently completed her MA in social justice and education, and she manages diversity in teaching centers for a cultural relations organization. So, Amanda, if you like, so the stage is yours. By the way, you can write your questions in chat. I will collect them, and at the end, if we have time, I will ask them to Amanda. So, Amanda, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to TDSIG for inviting me and for organising this really important event, which for me personally brings together two kind of core parts of my identity. So it's great to have a stage to share and discuss and find out more as well. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay, I hope everyone can see that okay. And
perfect, yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. So I shall begin. So just so you've got 45 minutes, please do let me know about the time. And if I'm speaking too quickly, please let me know as well. So I'm going to try and get through these 4 different things. So I'm going to talk about the background. This talk is based mainly on the research and my dissertation that I did for that master's. And I'll talk about the methods and the approach I used, the findings, and then finally some recommendations for publishers and content producers. So starting with the background, just to situate myself. So as I said, I'm an English teacher. I used to teach in Egypt. I've been based in Madrid in Spain, where it is still quite blue, clear blue skies. I'm also a materials writer, and my materials are based on anti-racism and including LGBT plus voices, also marginalized communities in general. I'm trying to put a focus on those communities. I'm also an activist, so I am part of a recent organization called the Comunidad Negra Africana Afrodescendiente in España, where we work and develop the voice of the Black community in Spain. Also part of several different organizations, LGBT plus educators in Madrid, and finally one that is really closely related to what I'm going to speak about is Social Racismo, where I'm a researcher and I'm working on the portrayal of race in history textbooks in the Spanish curriculum. So in the popular Spanish textbooks that are used here in Spain, we're researching basically how race is dealt with in those. Finally, on the lighter side, I don't know if anyone recognizes this comic strip. It is from Dykes to Watch Out For, which is Alison Bechdel's comic. And this strip was life-changing for me when I found out about the Bechdel test. Basically, these rules. I love film, and in this strip, it kind of emphasizes how gender biased film is, and so I can't enjoy films in the same way as I did previously. But please do have a look and Google the Bechdel test. So. I'm going to be talking quite a lot, but just to take a moment to pause and think about what diversity in teaching means to you. I think I focus on this now specifically in Spain because the word diversity, diversidad, it commonly has a connotation in Spain, which focuses on special educational needs. I take this moment to pause. Feel free to write in the chat if you have a specific, clear idea of what diversity in teaching means to you. Diversity is such a broad word. I often hear it being used. A couple of weeks ago in a meeting at work, a white colleague was commenting on the composition of our working group and said, "Oh, the names in this group," like she hadn't met us, but she said the names weren't very diverse and we needed some more diverse names. And that kind of got me thinking, like, what's a diverse name? And also just thinking about the fact that diversity is important, not just because of the sounds of names, or I think in the UK often there's an emphasis on colour, on skin colour, on diverse faces, you know, but it's important to include that it's not just something performative, that you're seen to have diverse faces, diverse names. It actually goes deeper than that and show value in what difference can bring. Exactly. So thank you people who are commenting in the chat. So as I said, this talk is based mainly on the dissertation that I did, and I based it on 1 year of teaching materials at one academic level. So the paper explained how Black people are portrayed in one level of teaching materials during 1 year, using the research question, how are Black people visually represented in in-house teaching materials for upper intermediate young learners? So what I did is I took all of our teaching materials for the level B21 that teachers are given to teach at this level for young learners, so under the age of 15, 13 to 15-year-olds. And this is what I analysed, like how, if there are any images of Black people in these magazines, how they're represented, what are they doing. I also added in a subsidiary question because for me, this is a great opportunity to really focus on race, and not just race, but also the power dynamics of race. So not being Black, but also what Black means in comparison to being white. So I had a subsidiary question of, does the visual representation of Black people change when juxtaposed in an image with white people? So I'm going to go on to my methodology. So the first thing that is important to state is that I'm a critical race theorist. So people might have heard most recently over the summer about critical race theory. It was made popular by Donald Trump, of all people. I feel a bit like saying Voldemort when I say Donald Trump. But he was quoted in the media, like he issued an order saying that critical race theory was divisive and un-American. Exactly. So maybe you've heard of it, but just to outline, critical race theory is comprised of many different components and principles. Some people don't agree with all the principles, but there's one unifying factor, one principle that all critical race theorists adhere to. And that is that racism is normal and omnipresent. So that is thinking about all of the institutions that are part of our society, that racism is just inbuilt, it's embedded into everything that we do and how we live, everything. And so that's really what I wanted to make clear, because I come from the point of view that racism is already there, you know, and it's important to find out and how it works, and then how we can counteract that to be anti-racist. There's an idea that if we talk about race, or we talk about racism, then you can't be neutral. But the fact is that there is no neutrality there already. If we don't talk about race and racism, you're coming from a perspective which is dominated by white hegemony at the moment. So I just wanted to clarify, this is what this research is based on. I also had another approach, which was critical discourse analysis. So the critical element of CDA is that it analyzes in the interests of those groups dominated by power in an effort to activate change for the better. Fairclough is another well-known critical discourse analyst, and he says basically it's about righting social wrongs through critiquing and advocating for change. So that's the basis of how I set up this research. So as I was looking through the images that I found in the next section in the findings, I'll tell you what images I found. But I had these questions in mind as I was looking through the images. So to actually analyze what's happening, one, what is the activity of the image? Now this is really important. It might sound really obvious, but what the person is doing in the activity can really mean so much. So I give the example of a study that was done. It was back in the 1930s now. So the study was done and children were shown a series of photos of a library. And after seeing all the photos, the children were asked to comment, what was the Black person doing in the library? Now, all of the children said he was cleaning the floor, he was cleaning the shelves, he was cleaning in the library. But the thing was, in the study, there wasn't a Black person. In the photos that were shown, there was no Black person. So the children just invented, if there's a Black person in the library, they must be cleaning, rather than actually reading a book. So this goes to kind of stereotypes and images that we're fed, you know, without consciously taking it in. Thanks, Sarah. I'm trying to multitask, but I'm not doing it very well. So I might come to the chat at the end, I think is best. So the second question, who is active in the image? So who's the protagonist, who's passive, the receiver in the image, who has status? This has a lot to do with conveying like clothing, clothing and other things, like how they're lined up in the image, where their focus is. 5, what does the body language communicate? What does the clothing communicate, and where are the eyes directed? So yeah, this was taken originally from a study by GISIG in 2000. So alongside the set of questions, the image analysis framework included a number of stereotypes. So these stereotypes come from studies that have been done in the 80s and 90s. There's a study by Chang in 2007, which studied, it asked students to think of an adjective associated with race, with Black people, different adjectives. So this comes in part from that study and previous studies on adjectives, but also adjectives associated with race. But it also comes from popular media and my own interpretations, okay, of stereotypes. So this first one, uncivilized, It comes from a few years ago when I was teaching, I think it was FCE, it was an FCE first certificate textbook. And I looked through just thinking about what Black people are there in this book. And I found 3 images of Black people. And the first one was a woman, a Black woman, and she was on the phone in the cinema. And the chapter was about being, about etiquette, being rude and being noisy. The second image was of a Black guy in a hoodie, and the chapter was about crying. And the third image was of a Black boy who's had this big smile on his face, and he was smiling because of the person who was next to him. In the next photo is a white girl who had done a fundraiser and collected money so that the boy could have a well in his village, African village. It didn't give a context or any kind of country. So that last image relates to number 4, the stereotype of poverty and being poor. So yeah, so these are the other stereotypes that came out with unintelligent, this idea of being aggressive in someone's face, athletic, so the sporty stereotype, poor, as I mentioned, exotic. I didn't really associate exotic with being Black, but then having looked through various studies, it can be seen as exotic as well. And when I moved to Spain, someone said, "Oh, you're so exotic." And I thought, am I? Girl from Kent, don't really think of Kent as being very exotic. Kent in the UK. So hypersexual as well, you see lots of images, videos, adverts as well, the sexualization of Black bodies. There's an entertainer stereotype, being a comic, of course, musical. And then this last one comes from my love of film as well, going back to those old black and white films, you know, the kind of, the typical mammy character, the first Black woman to win an Oscar, I believe, would play like a wet nurse who would care for white families. So yeah, so these are the basic stereotypes that I was working with. So going over to my findings. So with these findings, in total of, so 1 academic year of materials, all of the representations of Black people, how many Black images I found, dun, 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 20 images of Black people in 1 academic year in one level, okay? And overall, this came out as 22% of all images in the magazine contained a Black person, Black representation, which on the face of things, I think sounds quite high if you make it, if you compare it to, for example, the Black population in the UK, then 22% is quite high. But that's just the service level, you know, going back to that idea of diversity, it's not just about having some Black faces. What are the Black faces doing? How are they portrayed? If we look more critically at what they're doing. So in terms of images, so of the total 20 images, the most frequent activity was just a headshot, like a head and shoulders shot of a Black person. There are 3 working in a group, you know, like sat around a table, gathered around working on a project. There was 1 chapter on gestures, and I think this is where a lot of the touching hands came from. So when I say touching hands, there was like one of making a heart, one of one of making a heart that had like fist bumps and high fives, and yeah, those were the main ones. There were two drinking water from a fountain. So when I say from a fountain, like from a tap outside, and they were both black children, and they had their hands kind of cupped together to drink the water from the tap. And then I've just gathered these all together in a table, but they all had one photo, one image of a black person ironing, a black person hiking, black person ordering food, stroking a dog, lying in a hospital bed, and one image of a black person talking. Okay. So what images are missing? So for me, it's great that there's images of black people writing like this. I don't know, it kind of gives an image of creativity and intelligence. It goes against this stereotype of unintelligent. But still, I found it interesting, like nearly 100 years after that original study of showing photos to children of a library, and they couldn't imagine seeing a black person reading a book. I find it interesting that there are no photos of black people reading a book, or reading in general, reading anything. So just to go more into the active and passive participants. So the active participant, they're an actor. So whether they're alone or with someone else in the photo. The passive participant is the person who's is receiving from the active participant, from the actor. So they're having something done to them. So I use the term which is vectors as well. And the vectors help to establish who's active, who's passive, and what's happening, where the power is as well in each image. So keeping in mind that this active and passive participants, and that there were 20 photos, 20 images in total of black people, and who is active and passive. So when I looked only at images of black people with white people in them, black people are shown as passive the majority of the time. So in total, there were 10 images of black and white people together. So in a graph, that looks like this. So 87.5% of the time, black people are shown as passive, compared to white people being shown as passive 12.5% of the time. So again, we talk about, even though they might be included, it's great to have inclusion and have faces of black people in images, but they're still being shown as being passive or having something done to them, as not having status, not having power. So I included, this is just one image, thinking about body language. So this is one of the group photos, and you can see that they were working together in a group, sat around, like working on a project maybe. And there is one black person in the photo, and I'm not sure how clear the quality is, but you can see like there's a couple of people that are smiling, a couple of people that are looking intently. And then if you look closely, I'm not sure how well it comes across, but if you try and look closely at the black girl's face, it's like confusion or not understanding. It's not a smile. I'm not sure how clear that comes across. It's a little bit grainy when I've tried to reproduce the image here. But it just made me stop and think, because when you first look at the materials and you look through them and you don't really think about what's happening, you think, oh, there's a black person, great. But then you look closely and you think, what does this really mean? That they're confused, everyone else understands, but this person is confused. They're not as intelligent as the other people who are smiling and understanding it. So, sorry, this is quite a lot of text on one slide. So looking directly at the viewer in image analysis is attributed as demanding an interaction. The nature of the interaction is determined by the expression on the face of the person represented. If the expression is of disdain, the viewer is being asked to enter into a relation of inferiority. However, if the person is smiling, the invitation is to enter into a favorable relationship. In no image is the Black person asking the viewer to enter into an inferior relationship. So that makes sense, I guess. Like, why would you put photos and teaching materials of someone looking at you with an expression of disdain? But what's also interesting about this, so it's something to ponder. Why is that? But what's also interesting is that there are only actually three images where the Black person was portrayed looking at the viewer. The majority of the images of the Black person is looking down, so they're positioning themselves as lower, inferior, not wanting to enter into a relationship with the viewer, with the person who is reading. So I kind of took away from this as well. Like, if you remember back at the start, I had my framework of stereotypes, and really what came through were two main stereotypes which were repeated. And the first one was poverty. So with poverty, there are repeated images of Black children in need. So the images of these children needing water. There was a whole chapter on money, on talking about money, making money, earning money, pocket money. And there was only one image of a Black person in the whole of this material on money. And the activity that they were doing is ironing. So this again relates back, when you just look at it, you think back to this wet nurse stereotype. Someone who's doing something for a Black person, doing something for a white family, caring for a white family. That's what the image tells you. It's really interested also in the GISIG study that their study was conducted in Brazil. And they found that lots of times their students, adult students, were looking at the images and making their own assumptions from the images, even if we weren't talking, the lesson wasn't talking about the text to go with that image. So it's really important to keep in mind that even though there's an image there, you might not even be talking about what's happening on that page or teaching that page. The students are still looking through and they're still going to take it in and think about it. I say this because the ironing was actually in relation to earning pocket money, but that wasn't obvious at all from just looking at the image. And so also keeping on the theme of poverty, so the text below one image of a Black child drinking water from a fountain reads, "We must take action to solve the problem. No one should have to live without water." So it's interesting to draw this distinction between, it's kind of like them and us. So you have the Black child, and then on the other side, there's actually an image of a white girl. So it would suggest that the person writing was a white girl. So it's a kind of them and us, Black and white, they need our help, an implication of kind of like white saviorism There's something that we need to do for them, for me, for us, for Black people. So the second theme that I focused on was athleticism, being sporty. So before, when I said what the activity is in the image, I spoke about writing. There are two images of both boys. They're both boys writing. And in the first image of a young Black boy writing, he's writing about winning the boxing match. And it was actually really mind-blowing once I analysed this, because the image there, he's looking really pensively at his notepad and he's writing, and he looks about maybe 10 years old. And the text is actually about winning the boxing match. So again, it kind of related back to sport, the stereotype of sport. The other one which really struck out at me was another text related to a headshot of a Black guy, and it was about fitting in, not fitting in, and the Black guy had just moved and wanted to make friends, didn't know how to make friends, so he started playing football so that he could make friends. Now, it was so interesting because it actually had like a little study advice, like a little box, which was like an exam tip. And the exam tip said, infer meaning from what is written. So even though it didn't say that he liked playing football, the question was, does he like playing football? And the answer had to be yes, because you had to infer that meaning, because he's a Black person, because why? You don't know. You had to infer and make this association that the Black guy playing football, obviously he's going to like playing football. And then just the final one that came up for me through doing this analysis, and it wasn't immediately it wasn't something that I thought would come out, was this idea of an happy slave. So the happy slave is the idea of someone who cannot lead but is able to work. So again, this is why we have lots of photos or images of people that are passive but not active. The active slave is lacking in intelligence. And also we have this image of the happy slave. So they're happy. We have like an image of like a Black person with a big smiling face, and you can see their teeth. And there's a higher amount of images where you could see the Black person smiling and see all of their teeth in their smiling as well, like grinning. And this again has connotations, negative connotations. We have a UK Prime Minister who talks about Black people having watermelon smiles. A watermelon smile goes back to eating watermelons, which is like a messy fruit to eat. And this connotation of being unintelligent, you know? So nothing happens in isolation. The second, he who must not be named, exactly. So this happy slave was really like another moment for me when I was doing this analysis, because I thought, I wasn't expecting to find this, like the idea of someone being passive, of someone being in the background. Like Black people are there, but they're in the background, they're doing work, but they're still represented as being unintelligent, being unable to lead, and being uncivilized. So I'm just coming on to the final part now. So my conclusions basically were, there's a focus on deficiencies in Black lives. So there's an absence of representation of rich Black lives, rich in so many ways, not just talking about money, but in all aspects of life, culturally. There's this repeated portrayal of poverty and athleticism, and then also a colorblind approach. It was embedded in all of the materials. So that maintained racial hegemony. We'll talk about colorblind approach. I think specifically of Dr. Martin Luther King and his famous quote where he says he hopes that that one day his children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And I think people often twist this, and I myself had it twisted as well in the past, that this means we shouldn't focus on the color of someone's skin, that race isn't important. We're all the same. We're all the same color. We're all the same race, the human race. But that's not possible because we're not at that point. Because yes, race is a social construction. Biologically, we are absolutely 99.9% all the same. But that construction has had centuries to embed itself with this racial hierarchy, where Black people are not at the top by any means. And so it means that all of our institutions, our ways of working, even the ways that we choose images and put them into teaching materials, has a racial element to it, even though we don't think it is. So I'm just going to move on quickly to the recommendations. So there's a bonus here. I said there's recommendations for materials writers and content producers, but actually, and this is also for students and staff, so important to give mandatory training for teaching staff on how to talk about race and racism to students. In the keynote talk from Elizabeth earlier, she mentioned about responding to offensive comments. Often teachers don't want to, they just ignore it and they don't want to respond to any offensive comments, but it's so important that teachers are trained on how to respond to it as well and feel comfortable doing that. And also, so the training thus they come across a visual representation of a Black person that is negative, they're able to offer an informed correction. Mandatory teaching of visual literacy for students to include how race is commonly depicted visually. So this is so important. We're fed so many images, especially now we're in lockdown, constantly on screens, but without the skills and knowing how to unpick what these images are actually giving us. So for content developers, have these recommendations. Inclusion of images of Black people in positions of power when in a group with non-Black people. So this is so important. Not having Black people in a second line at the back. Serkan also commented that all the people at the front were white and the men were sat down at the front. In so many ways, like not just race, you know. So mandatory training for materials writers and designers on the importance of positive portrayal of Black people. Again, some people might think, oh, it's just the guy smiling or it's just the guy looking down. It's not. It has a lot more than that. We're maintaining, perpetuating these power dynamics. Inclusion of a chapter that directly references the topic of race, how it is a social construction and the legacy of its construction through a hidden curriculum. So I know we have the parsnips and don't talk about isms in teaching materials, and there was a conversation before about it's because of publishers and using money. No one wants to lose money. But if we don't talk about race, then change is not really ever going to happen. And if we keep adopting these colorblind approaches, then it's very difficult for change to happen. Including the topic of race at least brings it out into the open. I still have the same conversation with people about race being a social construction. Most people, not most people, but some people that I speak to believe that it's a biological fact, that race is based on biology. And we know it's been proven years ago that it isn't. This is also really important from a critical race theorist point of view. So another principle from critical race theory is about hearing the stories of Black people, hearing the experiences of Black people from Black people. So we don't often have that. We often might have experiences told about Black people, but not by Black people. And often when we include different experiences from Black people, it's very narrow. Those experiences or topics that are included relate to slavery or kind of historical or sports, you know, but there's so many different experiences that we have that we'd also want to be heard. The penultimate one, a review of all visual representations of Black people in all teaching materials to assess if Black people are negatively portrayed at multiple levels. So this goes back to, I just did this analysis based on 1 year at one academic level. It could be that it's just this academic level and there's a lot of stereotyping of poverty, of athleticism, of this happy slave image, and it doesn't exist in any other levels. But unless we actually do some research, unless there are people out there talking about race in EFL, then we won't really know. And because again of this, the money debate, like no one really wants to pay or no one wants to focus on race in publishing. So it's very difficult, and I know, but research is so important, and having the data there also speaks volumes. And so just my final recommendation is regular reviews. Whoops. So regular reviews of teaching materials to check their appropriateness in centering race and portraying Black people. So this isn't just a one-off thing, like I come this year, I've done this on this year, this academic year, this level, and it's done. It's not possible. Like, we're constantly changing, society is evolving, language is constantly changing. These reviews need to be built in regularly into what we do to make sure that we still are centering race, Black people being portrayed as equal, as active, and are able. And I think I've just got a couple of minutes left for questions. So if there are any questions, please come forth, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for the great presentation. Yes, maybe we can have 1 or 2 questions if you have.
Yeah. So that's great, Lottie. I didn't realize that. So some publishers are starting to audit their back catalogues and existing lists. Is that from the point of view of race or everything? I wonder.
There's a question from Bill. Do you know the work of Nurit Pellet, Literacy Studies from Hebrew University of Jerusalem? And there's a link there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Bill. Helen, go ahead, please. I'll stop sharing my screen. So Helen asks about a reaction to my research within the organisation where I work. At the moment, trying to think of my words diplomatically. So at the moment, in conversation, a meeting has been set up to talk about the research and kind of the recommendations that I've made. But at the moment, nothing's happening, but I'm optimistic that something will happen. So thank you for your question, Helen. It's really important as well, because like we do these papers, we do the research, and then it kind of just gets left in a vacuum and nothing comes of it. So I am optimistic that something will come from this. And it's great as well to have these events where I can talk about this research and share ideas with other people as well. So thank you again for organizing this.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Okay, I guess time is up. Thank you very much to all the participants. Tyson.
Hi. Yes, I personally would like to thank you, Amanda. It's been a fantastic, really fantastic session to hear about your work, which I will definitely follow up with you on. I'm pretty sure very soon. For everybody here, I just want to remind you that this is a free conference to attend. However, we are accepting donations that will be split to a charity of your choice later on today. And so I'm putting a little bit in the chat box about that, where you can donate to. That's the second link. And the first one is where you can actually choose which of the charities that were submitted by the participants ahead of time that we would like this money to go towards. Plus, if you need a certificate of participation, you actually have to vote to see which charity will get in order to get the certificate of participation part. So thank you very much again, Amanda. And our next session will be with Helen, who's in this room right now. That will be the next session in tent A. And then there is a forum in tent B. So I'll just show you what that looks like. I think. Okay, so you can see these at the hour or the next two sessions. So either stay here for Helen's or you can move over for Silvana's and Saurabh's in the other tent B. Okay, thank you very much. See you at the hour.